Welcome to the inaugural podcast of Data Points. I'm here with Tae Oh, the Vice President of Vantage Advertising and PSI Holding LLC. He's also served on the Guam Land Use Commission and is the Chairman of the Guam Chamber of Commerce. Welcome, Tae.
Thank you, Ryan.
I'm going to invite you to like, subscribe, or save on any of the channels that you're listening to us on. If you value this information at the end of it and you want to see more, please do us that favor. And if you have a real estate question, please reach out to us. We'll post the email address in the show notes here and then also on screen. Tae and I have gotten together to talk about Guam's housing crisis. And, just being in that industry, in the real estate industry, there is just so much, there are so many obstacles right now to getting attainable and viable housing to the community, and there's a huge demand. Tae, welcome. Can you tell me about some of the obstacles that you've seen in your roles and your businesses in the Guam real estate industry?
Yeah, sure, Ryan. There's quite a lot. It's really hard to say there's one issue. There's the affordability issue. There is the construction cost issue, the labor issues. There's a lot of areas that really need to that the industry really needs to focus in on and resolve some of these issues in order to bring really affordable or even attainable housing to the real estate market.
Okay. Well, what do you think some of the misconceptions are that people have about the affordability crisis?
Again, I could go on and on about this, but then if there's one thing, I think there's a misconception that there's plenty of land, so housing should be cheap. That's actually not quite true. There is plenty of land, but the fact is a lot of it is controlled by the U.S. military. A lot of it is in conservation. Some of it is not even properly zoned for housing. So we do have a large inventory of land, but the issue is that some of it is not repurposed for housing, right?
Right, and then, like you say, there's some infrastructural issues that get in the way.
Correct. You can't just build a house on a raw land when the infrastructure is not there. And without infrastructure, you can't have the proper zoning purposes. So those are some of the issues. Another misconception I hear a lot is the housing cost is high just because the developers are greedy. You hear that a lot, but the honest fact is the cost is so high.
Right.
The cost. If I haven't seen a developer build a major housing project in the past 5 to 10 years, because developers know the cost is so high and there's so much risk involved now that they'd rather not build, and that's why we have this housing shortage issue currently.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And there's just, people don't understand the time horizon that goes into development, from permitting to subdivision through planning and all that stuff, and also through the phases of construction.
Correct.
If it goes through the full cycle and you're not moving in inventory, it'll kill you.
Yep. That's absolutely right, Ryan.
So tell me about that, right? Tell me about some of the obstacles. Tell me about zoning laws. Do you think the zoning laws here are too restrictive?
Absolutely. Let's talk about that.
All right.
There's so many issues with our zoning law. Not only our zoning law, but also our building code, right? And I understand the logic behind it. The construction cost is so much higher here on Guam because we have such a restrictive building code here. Mm-hmm. And it's not due to, I'm not going to point fingers and say it's the government's fault that our building code is so restrictive. The fact is that we do have extreme conditions here. We had a 8.7 magnitude earthquake here. We had a typhoon that was equivalent to a Category 4 or Category 5 hurricane out in the mainland. So we do have extreme conditions here. Now, also, keep in mind, every time we have major disasters like this, we don't hear too many. It's great news, but we don't hear too many instances of major injuries or death because our building code is so strong. But don't forget that also drives up the cost.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah. So as you know, a lot of the houses out in the mainland are built with wood. Here we build with concrete. And then on top of that, we have to reinforce it with steel. So it does cost a lot to bring all of that material. And we don't produce any of that here, right? So we're importing all of that. So construction cost is high. There's other issues, like we have labor issues, and I could go elaborate on that further. But when it comes to the zoning issue that we have here is we're pretty restricted in terms of how we could rezone certain areas, considering that the infrastructure is really not there. You can't take for example, like if there isn't sewer in an area, you can't build a house on a lot that's anything less than approximately 2,000 square meters, which is about half an acre. Right. So you have this large lot, and then you have one house sitting on it. That's because there's infrastructure limitations on the lot.
Right, and so that's the density, I think, is an issue specifically because of that and because of the infrastructure, and we're not thinking outside the box. You know, one of my pet peeves is nobody asks why anymore, right? We just, that it's almost like I accept it because it's always been. And so you made a point where you're saying, well, it's not anybody's fault. Well, yes, it is. It's our fault. It's our fault as a community for not taking action and demanding what we want, right? And I think that's why we're having this podcast. That's why we want to have these discussions. And you've been a huge advocate for that. So I appreciate that.
Yeah. So when it comes to zoning, I think, yes, there are certain things that we could do as stakeholders in the industry and policymakers that could improve the zoning. But when it comes to the building code, I think it's a little difficult. There are certain measures that can be put in place, but it's still pretty restrictive.
Well, and that's what we have to look at, right? We've adopted the IBC,
Correct.
And we're not looking at different floor plans and footprints. We're increasing the cost to build.
Correct.
And that's where it's like, hey, man, let's think outside the box, right?
Correct. You're absolutely right.
So tell me, on that theme, tell me what role you think the government should play in increasing homeownership rates.
That's actually a big topic.
Huge.
Yeah, it's a huge topic.
We don't expect you to solve it here, Tae.
Yeah.
Just your thoughts.
There's many things that the government can do, right? And we could kind of take models from different places. For one thing, they could give some type of tax incentive. They could also, provide incentive in terms of density increases. Let's say for incorporating affordable housing into any type of new housing development that comes up. That's another thing. There's other things that the government can do. Like, for example, we have a major permitting issue here, right? It just takes so long to get permitted for one housing. This past year, I believe we wanted to build one house, and that one house took probably close to about 6 to 8 months of a permitting process. And we're projecting we're going to build in less than that time. So, you could imagine the construction time is actually shorter than the permitting time, right?
Right. And so for me, I think understanding those realities is important for us to be able to help the developer bring the buyers to the market to take that inventory off their hands quickly, because that'll kill you on, if
on so many levels.
Right. But think of Paradise Estates, right? 216 units, right? Huge successful development, but it, took how many years to sell out, right? So what if they built all those 216 units at once? Do we need them? Absolutely. But can we find the buyers for those in a timely enough fashion for the market to absorb them without the developer going bankrupt? And people don't understand that dynamic and why those margins are what they are.
Correct. You're absolutely right. Having sustainable development is important. When you have too much supply on the market, it could definitely drop the prices of a lot of the housing also. Those are things to keep in mind. Now, if prices drop too steep, then the developer has no incentive to build anymore.
Fair.
Right? So those are things that, of course, you do need to consider. Right?
Great perspective, Tae.
Yeah.
Can you talk to me about solutions going forward, namely public-private partnerships that you've seen that have been successful?
Yeah, sure. There's been many models, right? And then we have successful models in Singapore and Korea, and different places in Asia. There's also models that they've implemented in certain states out in the U.S. But of the systems, I would have to say the Singaporean model is quite interesting. Close to about 85 to 90% of Singaporeans live in public housing, right? And that they purchase the home, they take care of it, they find ownership in it. And Singapore did it in many innovative ways. First, they identify land that's underutilized, right? And then they join up with a private partner that could provide affordable housing or even attainable housing, right? Because depending on the people you talk to, they'll say, oh, that's not affordable anymore, right? But important thing is attainable is at least we could have the middle class start reaping the benefits of some of these programs. Now, identifying these lots, rezoning it, allow multi-use purposes for some of these lots, decrease the amount of regulations, allow faster permitting. And then the private partner, on the other hand, with all these benefits, they can incorporate these affordable, attainable housing to large complexes. Now, these large complexes are not technically all affordable housing. Some are at market rates. And then you can't really even tell the difference between a market rate unit and an affordable housing unit. So they're all integrated together, right? And so that provides many benefits that I could go into detail about. But when you have affordable, attainable, and market rate all in the same area, and you can't tell the difference, right? Then it really just gives that sense of ownership to everyone that's living there.
Right, 100%. Because if you channel everyone to like projects, right? To live together,
Correct.
right? Then it's almost like, what are you doing? You're segmenting us, you're isolating
Correct.
us. We're not part of the community. We're over here, right?
Correct.
Where the people who can't afford live, right?
And that's been the affordable housing initiative that they took in the United States in like the early 30s and 40s, right? And these Asian countries, their development came later, so they learned from the U.S. model.
Yes.
Right? So they realized that you can't just start grouping all the low-income housing projects in one area because eventually it's going to get dilapidated and it's just going to become another project, right?
No, I agree with you on the density issue and the mixed use. I'm on the same page. How do governments in other regions ensure that housing remains high quality and desirable?
There's several things that they do. The first thing that they, as I mentioned, they don't differentiate between market rate and also affordable, attainable housing. That's the first thing they do. Secondly, they create a housing association with the whole community there.
Right.
Being there. So then they could spread the cost out of maintaining those buildings, right? Now, if certain people, if residents there take ownership, and if, let's say, 75% is market rate, 25% affordable, there's a way that you could have a balanced approach to the cost of maintaining that property, right? So that's another huge benefit. Another thing that they normally Singapore does really well is they use high quality products. You're looking at installing materials that will last. Okay, that will last. So then by incorporating that into the design, they ensure that maintenance costs over the long run of the project is reduced quite a bit.
But you're a mechanical engineer?
Civil,
right? So you're an engineer by education,
yes,
right?
Yes.
Not necessarily practice, but you utilize it, I'm sure, daily in your practice. You said something about construction materials, right? Talk to me about construction materials that lower the cost for housing that we should be looking at.
There's quite a lot. Some of it is a little exploratory, and it's really it takes someone to take the risk to experiment with some of these trending methods and construction materials. Let's see, for example, there's that whole movement on 3D printed homes. That's definitely something that we could look at.
Yes.
But at the same time, we also do need to consider whether 3D printed homes can meet all the code requirements here, right? That's another area that you need to be a little cautious about, right? Another one is ICF. It's called ICF stands for.
This is like the forms?
Correct.
Right.
Correct. It's insulated concrete forms.
There you go.
Yeah. So ICF construction can be utilized here on Guam. So basically, when a new home is being constructed, you need all these forms so that you could pour concrete to fit that shape. But then ICF is pretty much just reusable.
It's like a puzzle, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
It is a puzzle. It could reduce costs. It could reduce the process. The only problem is that you're gonna need scale.
Yeah.
Right. Even with a 3D printed home, you're gonna need scale. If you bring that 3D printing machine out here, this is a huge machine, right?
Yes.
And my understanding is it costs about $500,000 to about $1 million in capital outlay in the beginning just
1.9. Yeah.
Right?
That's a lot. It's a big outlay.
Yeah. So then if you don't have scale, you can't divide the cost. That's also true with ICF.
But the savings is with speed and the lack of labor. Or is it materials?
It's twofold.
Okay.
It's twofold. I think with 3D printed homes, I think there could be some savings on the materials itself also. But at the same time, I know there could be dramatic cost savings in labor. ICF is the same, right?
Okay.
ICF, you'll still be using concrete, but at the same time, it's just going to cut in terms of the amount of labor that goes into making all these forms.
Okay. So you're a private developer. How can we incentivize you to create more housing?
Well, again, I think going back, relaxing on our zoning requirements. Guam is very unique, and I wanted to point this out, that sitting on the Guam Land Use Commission really gave me a perspective about the amount of infrastructure costs that goes into building anything new here. Now, don't forget, out in places like Singapore or in certain areas out in even the mainland, some of these infrastructure costs are subsidized by the government, by the local government, right? Now, here on Guam, we're trying to attract investors, large-scale investors, to come here that could build at a large scale. But then at the same time, when they get here, we tell them, hey, you need to put up all the roads and sewer and water, right? And we slap them with the bill, and then there's sticker shock, right, at that point, right? And they're not used to that, because normally when companies are investing that amount of money in a certain area, the government is very not only appreciative, but also at the same time, they want to have some type of cooperation to help the developer be successful, right?
Understood.
So yeah, tax incentive, regulatory relaxation, and then there's other areas, tax rebates on certain programs, and also land leases. That's a major one.
Yeah, you can do a Chamorro Land Trust lease for like 99 years.
Correct.
Right? Yeah.
Correct.
And so there just needs to be legislation to allow people to leverage, right? I think there's an obstacle to mortgaging, right? But we can fix that.
I believe if there is a land lease that lasts like 99 years, knowing that it is for housing purposes, I'm sure financial institution would get involved.
No, actually, I think there's something granular in the conveyance language that prevents encumbrance for conventional mortgages. So I think we just need to fix that.
Correct.
But I may be misinformed. I have to research that. But no, absolutely.
Yeah. But there are a lot of different ways that we could incentivize private developers. But one major issue is, again, as I mentioned earlier, is having a fast track program for permitting.
Yes.
That is a major concern.
I agree.
Yeah.
All right, Tae. So we talked about the problem. We've looked at elsewhere for solutions. So what do we do?
Well, there's several things we could do. One thing. Let's go back to the permitting process. If certain projects can get some type of favored response from the government, let's say if at least 20% of the units are dedicated for affordable homes, then they get some type of priority processing.
That's a great idea.
That's one way we could really incentivize developers. Another is pre-approve affordable housing designs. This is a new concept. Basically, if certain designs are available that, let's say, a builder or even a landowner would like to build, and these have all been reviewed in the past.
Yes.
They just select that and they go through the process, and it could really reduce the amount of time when it comes to permitting. Right?
That's a great approach as well.
Yeah. There are others. I think at the recent GURA Summit, Housing Summit, there were suggestions about reducing the lot sizes from 2,000 square meters to something smaller.
4,500, right?
Yes,
I think
correct.
4,500 square meters.
4,500 square meters. But keep in mind, again, going back to the primary issue that everyone's facing is infrastructure, right?
Yes.
Sewer, water. You need to make sure all of that is available. So, just kind of changing our mindset from a single family home, our traditional like large lots with one house in the middle of it. I think we need to change our mindset that we got to start moving away from that to a little bit more like medium density areas. There's multi-use properties out in the States, out in everywhere actually around the world, where you have very walkable communities where the first floor is normally retail or commercial activity, and then the upper floors are normally housing units, right? So if you could create that type of walkable neighborhood, I'm sure that we could alleviate some of that problem.
No, yeah, and for me too, transportation. Having been a realtor before, distance from work is always a huge issue.
Correct. Correct.
Just because if I don't have a car, I'm in affordable housing for a reason, right? I'm trying to work my way out. How do I get to where I need to go at a place where gas is $5 a gallon?
Yeah, so there's synergy involved in all of that, mainly because, we have mass transportation issues here on Guam. If you really go back to why we have that issue, it's because we're so spread out, right? We're so sparsely populated that if you don't have major densities of population, it's really hard to have a urban mass transportation system, right?
Yes, that's key. Because if you're servicing the South, like UMATIC has 800 people,
Correct.
right? And it's hard to sustain a line like that.
Correct. You're absolutely right.
Well, what do you think the market's going to look like in the next 10 years? We got the buildup coming, right? They extended to 2032. Camp Loss, man, I don't recognize Route 3 at all. It's crazy over there. So what do you think it's going to look like here in 10 years?
Housing market is going to definitely change. I'm kind of predicting that prices are still going to increase, but not at the rate it did a few years ago. There has to be some type of innovation. Mainly, it has to be led by GovGuam. And if GovGuam and GURA can steer this properly, I think we could bring some innovative ideas and innovative construction technologies here to Guam so that we could kind of make housing a little bit more affordable for the people here.
And so I'll stop you there, right? Just is that we mentioned about what the government's good at. Is the government good at innovation? Are we asking the wrong person to do that?
Government should be, their role should be governing and ensuring that public policy is in place so that these private partners can bring the innovation.
Fair.
So setting the stage is the first step.
Yes, I agree. Right, just clear policy, clear execution.
Correct.
What you see is what you get. There's no murkiness.
Absolutely.
Yeah. No, and I think that's missing, and I think that's something we need to change very quickly.
Yep. I did wanted to mention one last thing immediately that might be able to resolve some of the housing shortages. I know there's been a lot of talk about ADUs, accessory dwelling units. That's one way. That's an immediate Band-Aid fix for Guam.
I agree. Fernando Estevez talks about some of the social consequences of, intrafamily housing and just intergenerational families and even unrelated families living on top of each other. And you see the police blotter, right? And the magistrate's report, right? It's like, what?
Yeah.
How does this happen? And if you put someone out in an ADU, at least that gives you space,
Correct.
privacy.
Correct. And if you're a private landowner and you own the land, if you want to build housing for, let's say, the next generation of your family, then the burden is a lot less. Right?
Yeah. And I would say to the public who's not out there, you don't know how bad it is until you've walked a property corner and you've seen a pallet shantytown, popped up on the edge of a property about 40 people deep, right? No sewer, no running water.
Absolutely. Right. So if without these policies, we're basically creating a situation where certain folks are going to just build illegally, right? And,
it's a matter of survival.
Yeah. I get it.
Yeah. So how would you advise someone trying to get in the market now, right? We know the middle income issue is a huge deal, right? The affordable housing, I guess it's like they calculate it to be like $2,000, but that includes utilities.
Correct.
We know that a 3-bedroom house, $2,400, anything livable, right, for the most part, or even any rental program now. There's no differentiation between affordable rental programs or military. It's the middle class that gets crowded out.
Right. You're absolutely right. If a young professional is looking at preparing to purchase a home in the next 5 to 10 years, they need to be very mindful of their finances, right? And they need to follow the current interest rates. What's preventing a lot of folks from acquiring housing is basically the mortgage rates, the interest rates, and also the leverage amount, right?
Yes.
So those they need to start thinking about their their credit scores. Obviously, they need to also explore first-time home buyer programs.
Yes.
That's another major one. I know the Guam Housing Corp does have a program to assist first-time home buyers find a place. What else is there? They need to start saving for a down payment and closing costs, right? And that's major. You're looking at like 10% to 20% of the purchase price sometimes, right? So I know first-time home buyer program might have, let's say, 100% financing, but there might be a lot of restrictions with that too.
Yeah, like for me, it's liquidity. Correct. Most people can't come up with 20%. And so maybe I scrape together 3% for an FHA loan, but now I'm slapped with mortgage insurance, right? Which is, how am I going to afford that at an interest rate that's 7% plus this? It's so cumbersome and it's almost unsolvable. But there are great programs like the USDA Direct Loan that subsidizes rates down to below market. And so as a portal to developers, this is amazing. And then there's also an apparatus to quickly package those borrowers into digestible transactions. We can absorb this. We can get them in a house in XYZ. Meaning, it's almost a self-certification. You have these packagers, right? So we can do community outreach. We can get all these people to come in and say they're going to buy. We can place them, but the problem is no one has the cash, right?
That's always the issue.
So, but what you say is come up with the plan, start working the plan.
Yes.
And that is really the success to any venture.
Absolutely.
You have a plan, you work it, because you're building wealth, you're building a business, right? Essentially.
Absolutely.
And so
you're actually building a mechanism to increase your personal wealth, right? It's like the difference between the net worth between an individual that owns a home and doesn't own a home is quite dramatic.
Right. And so for me, I think the subsidies should be bringing people to multifamily. So help people buy their first multifamily. Put the tenant in there, and that's a wealth builder. Now you solve two problems. Now you're building generational wealth Plus, you're providing affordable housing. Incentivize people to act in that way. And I think thinking around the problem is the solution.
So going back to that, and that is, this is, well, you got to kind of think outside the box. My first home purchase was not a single family home. It was a fourplex.
Right on.
Right. And I did that mainly because of the fact that I realized that there's a certain amount of rental income that comes from that. I could live in 1 unit, 3 units, I could rent it out, cover the mortgage, and have a little bit of left for myself and my family.
Right, and most people don't know if you buy a multifamily with a tenant in it, generally 70% of the rent gets applied to your qualification.
And it's not considered commercial loan, by the way.
Yep, you can do multifamily up to 4 units.
Correct.
Right. Yeah. And so we talk about contractors wanting to leverage their margins. Well, there's margin there. 4-unit FHA, I think over $1 million, I think is the loan limit. And there's plenty of margin there for developer.
You're right. Yeah. You're right.
And with the rental rates where they are, plenty of margin there for the homeowner in terms of cash flow. Yep. If you've lived your why and you have that down payment, or we come to the table with a solution that helps you bridge that gap. Correct.
I get it. It could be tough with the current inflationary situation we're kind of living in.
Yeah, we're going to 10%? I don't know.
Yeah.
Tariffs.
And then the tariffs are not going to help. But if we gotta on the public policy side, we do have to start controlling our cost of living.
Yes, this is our new normal. And I think expecting prices to go down is just wishful thinking.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Tae, thank you so much for joining us on our inaugural. God, we went through this whole thing, and I was doing so well, and I messed it up at the end, But thank you for joining us on our inaugural Data Points podcast. You've shared some amazing insights, and I'm going to put your email up on the screen, and I'll say it out later for those of you listening on Spotify. Or we'll put it in the show notes so you can reach out to Tae and get a hold of him. He's again Chamber of Commerce, the chairman of the Chamber of Commerce. I'll get it right. But with all the work that comes with, he wants to hear about your issues as well. So please reach out to Tae. And thanks for joining us. I hope you all learned something today. And please join us in this space. Like, subscribe, share, tell your friends, and give us a following if you value what you see here. Hope to join you again soon. This is Ryan with Tae, and we're at Data Point.